Hey, what's up everybody? Welcome back to another VTuber reaction. Today we have the Hoshimatic project's cover of Unknown Mother Goose. This is a 10-person supergroup, I suppose, of a bunch of VTuber singers. I looked through the list of who's partaking in this, and I don't recognize over half of them, so this should be very interesting to hear people singing for the first time and not know who's who, but I will try my best to figure that out as I go along. Some I do know, obviously, like Toa and Suisei and like a few others that are in their Subaru I recognize, but like that's about it. I also want to say that I do have not the best history with these group songs from VTuber groups. It's not that they're bad songs, it's just sometimes the voices don't really meld together well and they tend to kind of hit me weird, so I'm not sure if that'll happen here. I hope it doesn't, considering 50 people wanted me to listen to this, including Mage Jirosu, the one who made the comment for me to actually get to it, and a lot of people liked it, but that's no guarantee, and I just want to make sure that people are aware going into it that there's nothing personal there. It's just sometimes certain vocal combinations don't gel with me, but for all I know, that could be a complete non-issue with this one, so I won't know if I don't listen and shut up. So without further ado, let's go. Oh! Didn't expect it to be so upbeat right off the bat. So far, all those voices blend really well. Interesting instrumental, too. All these voices are blending really well, actually. I'm finding myself pleasantly surprised. Oh, that's sick. I love that with the harmonies going on. They split it in the mix, too. What a note. Can't hear a little bit of adjustment to that note, but that makes sense. No harm, no foul. It's a very difficult flip to do naturally, and I gotta assume that this is probably a Vocaloid song given the feel of it. Yeah, definitely some adjustments in those higher squeaky notes, but no problem with no shame with that one, you know? Literally inhuman effort. Some rim clicks on the snare. Let's go. I'm finding myself pleasantly surprised with this overall. Their voices work really well together. Same thing with like the speed here. You can tell they're kind of cranking it a little bit. Gotta keep up somehow. I think if anything, I'm actually surprised they're doing well enough getting up there. It's like you can hear the adjustment, but it's not that bad. Find myself jamming to this. Ooh, they changed the ears. That's weird. But I kind of love it. And now it's in all of it. Okay. I see what they're going for with the mix here. Just bopping casually. Good accent patterns on the end there. Yeah, that was like pleasantly surprising. I think my prior experience might have been tainted by maybe more indie groups with less trained or familiar vocalists, so like it felt a little bit underwhelming, but they all knew what they were doing, and it was very clear. So yeah, a really good song. I mean, obviously it wasn't them writing it. I knew that going in. I wasn't anticipating any of that being a factor, but they performed it very well, even with those things in there that are very Vocaloid specific, like those extreme patterns on the syllable counts. It's just stuff that like humanly isn't that possible. It's possible, but it's very, very difficult. So they just kind of crank the speed and post probably, or they record a bunch of them over and over again to get it as close as they can in speed. Given the feel of it, it actually sounds like they recorded like at a half speed and then they sped that up, you know, kind of similar to how they would record Alvin and the Chipmunks level stuff. Obviously they didn't chipmunkify the voices for this, but it had a similar feel to how the vocal patterns kind of work, where like you record it in half speed, then play it back in full, and it kind of has that same artifacting feel to it, but also those high notes. That is definitely humanly possible, but God, it is not easy, and I wouldn't expect anyone else other than like a classically trained, extremely proficient vocalist to be able to do that on whim. Like I said during the reaction, it's impressive they got as close as they did. You could kind of hear the artifacting at the top where they were kind of pulling it up into pitch because you're going to be a little bit off. That's just how humans are. We're not perfect pitch enabled by default. So even them getting as close as they were and just adjusting from there is still really impressive for the takes that they got. There's also just a lot of good rhythmic movement in this song too. Like back to the instrumental on that and this whole production here. This was done really well. That instrumental section at the very beginning was super interesting with everything. It just felt like this gigantic bucket of sound that had a bunch of different things going on. It almost felt a little muddy, but not necessarily in a bad way. It just felt busy. And then as things kind of were shaven off as the song went on and all these different sections were handled and all the different singers came in and out, and they definitely played to the singer's best interest vocally as well. Like there was never a spot in here where I'm like, ooh, they really shouldn't have hit that spot, you know, like again with some of the vocalists in here just trying their best to get to those high notes. That was like the worst of it, but I see no reason to like harp on that. It's just a factor of the song, and they did an amazing job getting where they could as far as they could. So everything else in here worked really well vocally. They all blended really nice. The pairs that they chose for that one section, especially like the first one where they had both singers going and they were like splitting it in the mix between your ears, and that sounded really cool. And then that spot at the end where they had it like more weighted on this one side, had the vocalist on the other side, then they switched it to the other, and then they did it all centered, and it's like, dude, what is going on here? That's some super creative stuff to do that, like to bounce around. People have been doing that for decades in concept at this point, where like you'll open up one and close the other when it comes to the stereo sound, and utilizing that ability to make it sound a little bit more full. That's half the fun of mixing, right? But at the same time, doing that specific thing felt super creative, like having it all in one ear, having the vocalist isolated to the other, and then switching that and having it full in the center at the end is just a really creative adaptation of that technique. So I think they did a phenomenal job there as well. I don't know if that was in the original version. I haven't heard the original version of this song. The name sounds familiar, so I feel like it's probably been around before, like I've seen it on a sidebar or maybe in a list of other Vocaloid stuff I've heard, but I haven't actually listened to it, so I don't know if that's a thing that's carried through to this version and they just adapted it that way, way, or if it's a completely original idea that their mixer decided to go with, and either way, it's really interesting, and that adds a lot to that song. Just the feel of everything in your ears changing can make the song feel an entirely different way, so just managing that and balancing it in such a unique way, it's really fun to me. I really enjoyed that a lot. As far as the individual vocalists go here, everybody had a great part in this. Like I said earlier, I loved how they all sounded and blended together. I think specifically my favorite vocalist out of this one, like the shocker one for me, might have been Sora. Like, I knew that Subaru sang, I've heard her voice before, I haven't heard her in a production before, but I was like, hey, that's about what I expected. But Sora's voice was just the perfect amount of soft. It had this nice, like, shaven edge to it. It's just like, I couldn't help but smile internally. I don't know if that's the right way to word that, but like, it made me feel good. It just had a good tone to it. And then of course you got the other obvious ones like Towa in there, who just have this extra grit to their voice that helps ground everyone else, that has a little bit more of a thin tone. And there were some in there I honestly expected to sound a little bit thinner when they sang, but then didn't at all. And that just shows that they're opening up their voice properly and letting out that extra volume and tone, and they're just really sinking their teeth into it, and it just sounds so good. And I would say my second standout for this one would probably be Chloe, actually. She did a really good job. She has a similar, like, slight edge to her voice that I've come to hear from other people I've been listening to recently, Towa being one of those, where it's like they feel like they could sing on a stage in like Broadway stuff, or on stage with like a heavy metal band if they really needed to. You know, like, it just feels like they have this flexibility in their voice, this latent ability to pull out their texture in their throat and be able to do distortions on top of their voice, or just completely get rid of it and sound gorgeous on a traditional stage. It's just one of those voices. But yeah, pleasantly surprised, and I feel like if I keep talking, I'll just keep saying the same things over and over again, so that'll be the end of this video. If you have any other songs you want me to get to from anyone else on this list, maybe, by all means drop them down below and I will do my best to get to them as always. And of course, if you just like this video and you want to follow me and support me for more stuff in the future, you know how to do all that, and I will see you all in the next video. Goodbye!